Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are usually joined by a different guest. But for Game Week 3, we have the first solo podcast of the season. I do really enjoy doing these across the season, but specifically this week, because I'm recording on a Tuesday morning, because obviously we have bank holiday on Monday, I want to get this turned around pretty quickly, and it is slightly easier when it's just me by myself. And also, I think given that this is FPL therapy and given the start to the season that a lot of us have had, myself included, it feels like we can sort of have a one-on-one FPL therapy session here where I try and coach you to remain patient, remain calm, myself included in that as well, and realize that FPL is played across 38 game weeks, not 2. And also there is a large amount that is out of our control. Some of us would have made mistakes with our Game Week 1 teams, and I'm looking at myself there in particular, but also some of us have probably had slightly trickier starts than we deserve when you look at the teams we've put together. So we're going to discuss all of that today. But yeah, sit back, relax, whatever you're doing right now. Hopefully this next hour or an hour and a half will help you to put you back on the right track in FPL. This podcast does continue to be sponsored by Club, which is a brilliant free-to-play fantasy football mobile game. It will be linked down below as always, and a big thank you to Club for continuing to sponsor the podcast. And final little bit of housekeeping. If you aren't yet subscribed on YouTube, I'm really trying to push for 20,000 subscribers. I would really appreciate it. Drop a like while you're there as well. And if you are listening on audio, please do remember to rate 5-star. It goes a really, really long way. So let's do this. Game Week 2 was absolutely horror. So we're going to review Game Week 2 today, my own team, some of the players that stood out, some of the teams that didn't perform the way that we expected, but all of that with an eye looking forward to Game Week 3. We'll also go through my team, my plans, and I've also got a free hit and a wildcard draft today as well. So plenty to go through. So let's start with my team. I managed to get 37 points. 37 points in Game Week 2. And I know a lot of you out there would have definitely had worse because, again, lots of the key players blanked. But I've also seen some people do really well. I'd love to know down below in the comments, how many points did you manage for Game Week 2? And I actually got a question before I even read out my team and go through it. Someone said, please do a retrospective of how the first 2 weeks have gone for you. What could you have done better? Is there anything you missed that you see now would have been smart to think about? It would be nice to get a look at how you learn, especially when it does not go well. And I'll be honest, often it does not go well in FPL. You can't get green arrows every single week. Well, at least I can't. So let me read out the team and then I'll talk through what I think, again, a lot of hindsight, recency bias, but what I think the potential mistakes were with my Game Week 1 team. And it's very difficult to do this immediately. I think at the end of the season, it's much easier to look back. But I'll absolutely give that a go. So in goal, I had Sanchez, obviously conceded from a 0.01 XG chance from Paqueta. I had Esteve, who, by the way, ended up being my highest scoring player. A Burnley defender, Esteve, was my highest scoring. My joint highest scoring was Dubravka on the bench. I also had Nico Williams and Richards, who obviously played out in a 1-1 draw. I literally just need one of the teams to keep a clean sheet, and it would have been nice. I also had Pedro Porro sub on for his 5-pointer off the bench for Parma. My midfield was Salah, who got a very late assist, Florian Wirtz, who continues to disappoint, and I had Fernandes and Reinders both with blanks. Fernandes technically did get the DEFCON return, but obviously missed the penalty, so it was just evened itself out. And then it was Fulkrug and Watkins as my front two. The pair of them are still yet to get me an attacking return across the first 2 weeks. So that was the team, 37 points. What do I think the mistakes are looking at this team? Because you can say something like, I don't know, picking Fernandes was a mistake because he's blanked. I still back the reasons that I picked Fernandes as an example. Picking Salah is a mistake because Haaland's outscored him. Yeah, but I don't see that as a mistake. Just because you pick a player that doesn't return, I wouldn't class that as a bad decision or a mistake. But there are some issues with this team. The first issue I have is the Fulkrug Wirtz situation, I'll call it. So I said going into Game Week 1 that I thought that out of Bruno, Watkins, and Wirtz, I think Bruno and Watkins were the better two players. If I was to only select two of the three, I would select Bruno and Watkins, and I would probably drop Florian Wirtz. I just got into this position with my team where I just couldn't drop Wirtz. I was really worried that he was just going to hit the ground running. Liverpool were going to score tons of goals, which, by the way, they have 7 goals in 2 games, and that Wirtz was going to go up in price to 9 million really quick, and I was going to regret not starting. It wasn't necessarily FOMO as much as just I thought he was an excellent player and that he would start really, really well. That was a mistake because once I decided I wanted Palmer, Salah, Bruno, and Watkins, putting Wirtz in meant that I had to go not only super cheap in the defense, and I would love to have a Munoz, I would love to have a Cucurella in there, but it also meant that I had to go for Fulkrug instead of like a João Pedro or a Chris Wood. So that one decision that I said actually to, I think it was to Praz in one of the FPL Therapy episodes, I said it stinks of not being able to make a decision. Having Watkins, Bruno, Wirtz, Palmer, and Salah was me sitting there saying, I can't decide which of them to drop. And for me, that is a mistake because it's completely offset the balance of my team. So now looking at my team, it's a little bit weak in defense, and I've got a full Krug position in my team that I can't really switch out. So that is, for me, a huge error. The reason being for that is there aren't any really good cheap forwards right now. So not only do I have a full Krug issue to sort, I don't really have a great pivot point. Like you could move to a Thiago, for example, and I'll discuss that later with my sort of transfer plans for Game Week 3. But I'm missing that sort of 7.5 position in the team. Like if I'd have done something as simple as Florian Wirtz down to a 6.5 like Ismail Assar and Fulkrug up to João Pedro, all of a sudden that is just such a better team overall. The balance, the players that I would have picked. So I think that is the mistake, is that I sacrificed balance. I had a really dodgy price point in the forward line just because I couldn't make a decision about which of the premiums to include. So I think next year, and I always say I'll learn from my mistakes, and I probably never do, just make the hard decisions. And that's easy to say, right? Listen, if Wirtz, Palmer, Salah, Fernandes, and Watkins had all hit the ground running and got tons of points, I'd probably be sat here saying, right, I'm really glad that I decided to go for all of them. But as things stand, every single one of those players I just listed, not only are they so expensive, but they've been so disappointing. And when all of your budget is within 5 players, you need those 5 to do really well. So yeah, there's a little bit of a retrospective for you. I really do try to learn from my mistakes. And like I say, I think saying like, oh, picking Nico Williams was a mistake because he blanked twice, that's not really a mistake for me. That's just didn't get the right outcome that I wanted. But I think there are definitely some key mistakes in the team. And I would probably advise that you try and do something similar and reflect on how you could have maybe improved your Game Week 1 team. Right. All of that being said, let's go through the games from Game Week 2, discuss what I saw with my eyes, look at some of the data, defensive contributions, and then also, like I said, fixtures moving forward and players that I think you could potentially look at. Just a few notes ahead of Game Week 3. So the first thing is, there is an international break between Game Week 3 and Game Week 4. The reason I bring that up is it would be nice, if you can help it, to carry some free transfers into the international break. So if you don't really see any massive thing that you need to do with your team, don't necessarily force it. Because if you can come into Game Week 3, Game Week 4 after the international break with like 3 free transfers, that'll put you in a really nice position. There are often injuries in the international break. I'll say throughout, I think people exaggerate how many injuries are picked up in the international break, but you could get issues. You could have players returning late. So I guess just keep an eye on all of that. And also like injured players, like we'll discuss some of the injured players today. If they're out for 3 weeks from their injury, which took place in Game Week 2, it could be that they're back for Game Week 4 because you've obviously got 2 weeks between Game Week 2, Game Week 3 and Game Week 4. So hopefully all of that's clear. The next thing is there are EFL Cup games midweek. So there are 11 Premier League teams playing on Tuesday and Wednesday in the EFL Cup. 2 of those games are all Premier League ties. So again, keep an eye on those games because there could be injuries. I really wouldn't, unless you've already done it, be making early transfers this week because so much could happen. And not only do we have those 11 teams, we obviously have Crystal Palace playing their second leg in the UEFA Conference League playoffs as well. So lots happening throughout the week. And also the transfer window is open too. So I will keep re-emphasizing, even if you're going to lose a bit of team value, I probably wouldn't move early. And then looking at Game Week 2, I like to just sort of do a defensive contribution recap because that is the big change this season. There was actually 27 players, I think, that came away with defensive contribution points in Game Week 2, which was 17 defenders and 10 midfielders. It was actually Garner that had the most defensive contributions with 17. Van Dijk, though, was second with 15. And remember that Van Dijk was first in Game Week 1. He had 21 in Game Week 1 and 15 in Game Week 2. Van Dijk is sitting at 36 defensive contributions already, averaging 18 a week. That is monstrous. If Liverpool can start to keep some clean sheets, he is going to be fantastic value. So if you picked him, I still think that I'd probably rather Cucurella right now or a Munoz or a Porro, but I still think he could offer really nice value. And it's nice to see that the players that we thought would pick up defensive contributions actually are. There were, of course, lots of players that were close. Anderson, for the second week in a row, finished on 11 defensive contributions. Tosin, if you had him from Chelsea, finished on 9. Chris Richards finished on 8. So yeah, some players have been a bit disappointing, like the Forest defenders, but some of the ones that we expected to pick up DEFCON, like Lacroix, Van Dijk, they are doing it on a regular basis, which is nice to see. So, first game of the game week, Friday night, absolutely stinking, honking start to the game week was West Ham 1, Chelsea 5. So the only player that picked up defensive contributions in this game was actually Agurd with 13, so only the one player. And that's really because West Ham didn't bother defending and Chelsea were just attacking. I did say, like, if a team has a tricky fixture where they spend the whole time defending, they're more likely to pick up DEFCON points. But West Ham just didn't really bother defending in this game. So we had goals for Chalobah, Neto, Enzo, Caicedo, and João Pedro. And obviously Paquetá with his 0.01 XG long shot was the goal. And then assists, obviously João Pedro picked up the 2 assists. Cucurella with a little flick on for João Pedro's goal. And then Enzo and Estevao, by the way, who I thought was highly impressive once again. So do I think 5-1 was a fair scoreline? Potentially. Like, West Ham did have very limited chances. Chelsea dominated the game. It looked like two teams in different leagues. You know, when you watch like an FA Cup or an EFL Cup game and it's a team from League 2 versus a Prem team, no disrespect to West Ham, it genuinely looked that bad at points. And again, they just gave up. After the Fulkrug goal got disallowed, and that was obviously, anytime a goal gets disallowed when you think you're going to go into the lead, that is a major thing that can affect the energy within the stadium and within the team. After that, Chelsea were just completely dominant. But it shows how much one small event can change. Because if that Fulkrug goal stands, not only do I have more points in my FPL team, and by the way, it was like half of his foot was offside, but you do wonder how this game goes if West Ham go 2-1 up. I think obviously the big talking point is Cole Palmer picking up the injury in the warm-up. So apparently, he's been struggling with a groin injury for a few weeks. So in the lead up to Game Week 1, during Game Week 1, he's been having this issue with his groin. And apparently, according to Simon Phillips, he was already booked in to have a scan on Tuesday. So on the day of me recording, on the day of this going live, he was booked in to have a scan anyway. The plan was for him to play the West Ham game, then have the scan and work out what they need to do from there. But during the warm-up, apparently he felt his groin again and didn't feel comfortable continuing. You could view that as a good thing because it was precaution, right? He didn't injure his groin. Apparently he just felt it again. It's something he's been struggling with anyway, and he's been managing to this point fairly well. The other way to view it, though, is that it's been ongoing, it's not getting better, and they felt it was bad enough to at least booking a scan ahead of time. At the point of you watching and listening, you might already know, so I don't want to talk about this too much because otherwise it will be outdated. All of that to say, the early estimates is quite a wide range. We're between 2 and 6 weeks. So it doesn't look like Palmer will be out for months and months and months unless he needs surgery. I would say that there's a good chance he misses Game Week 3 based on what I know right now. Again, let's see what the news is on Tuesday, and I think we adapt later in the week when we get more information. That obviously meant because Palmer was out, João Pedro became the main man. And obviously, if you knew that Palmer was going to be out, then maybe João Pedro would have been a really good buy ahead of Game Week 2. Not that I had a route to him. But yes, it means he's probably on penalties, you would imagine, which is a massive bonus. But even outside of that, he looked so talismanic. You know, at points last season and throughout his Chelsea career, Palmer has just sort of got the ball and dominated the game and run with it and created and had shots. João Pedro was playing that role. In the number 10, he was the one picking up the ball. He was dropping deep. His assist, by the way, for Neto's goal was brilliant. He took his goal well too. I don't think João Pedro owners got lucky at all in the sense that I think he deserved all 15 of his points. It was a really brilliant performance. And I'm now looking at it now. If Palmer is out and I have to sell Palmer, I also don't have João Pedro. I would find it very difficult if Palmer is out medium to long term not to go and get João Pedro in my team. And that's not to say, by the way, that if Palmer's fit and available soon, that João Pedro still isn't good. So in hindsight, another mistake maybe to go without João Pedro, although in Game Week 1, it looked justified because it was poor. This shows how little information we really have to go on right now. In Game Week 1, João Pedro and Palmer looked terrible. Game Week 2, João Pedro looked brilliant. Chelsea looked free-flowing. Which is the true Chelsea? I would probably lean more towards saying Game Week 2. So yeah, João Pedro looks absolutely fantastic. I thought Cucurella was really good once again. Cucurella for me is the pick of the bunch at the premium defender price point. He's got an assist, he's got a clean sheet, and he's just playing so advanced. And I actually think that Cucurella is just a quality player. Like, in the box, he makes good decisions. The flick on was fantastic. I don't think he's got bad finishing as well, for like a defender at least. And he's just picking up areas on the pitch where it's like, he shouldn't really be there for a defender, but he is. He's already up to 6.1 million, fully justified. So again, if I was building a wildcard right now, as much as I would be tempted to go cheap in defense, which I've kind of done on the wildcard, I'll show you later, I would also have no issue with just plugging Cucurella in as my sort of premium defender price point. I think you've got a Ryan 8 Nuri and the update isn't positive on him this week, which by the way, apparently it's only a small knock, then a Ryan 8 Nuri to Cucurella looks like a decent transfer for me. I think that's it, really. Like I say, Fulkrug goal ruled out. He was hooked at halftime. I think if you've got Fulkrug, I would be very, very happy looking to move him on. And I think Bowen is also a decent sell. Like, people are criticising Fulkrug left, right, and centre. Jared Bowen's not done much more for his price, and he's a lot more expensive. So I think if you've got the West Ham players, the fixtures don't really look fantastic. Like this week, they're playing against Forest. We know that Forest are a very decent defence themselves. They don't concede many chances. So yeah, buy Chelsea players, sell West Ham players. It was pretty dominant from Chelsea all round. The next game then, Man City 0, Spurs 2. This was a big surprise for me. I really underrated Spurs and I really probably overrated Man City. But I do want to say that as much as I think Spurs, you could absolutely say, deserve something from the game, maybe even deserve the win, I do think on another day, City get at least a draw from this game. So XG doesn't tell the whole story, but the XG was 1.55 in favour of Man City to 1.11 for Spurs. So if you're looking at the data, City had more chances and more quality chances. They missed 2 big chances as well. And again, on a normal day, you would expect them to probably take one of those. And Spurs get 2 goals from 1.11 XG. So again, Spurs were highly impressive, and I'll discuss them in a second. But I do think that Man City deserved probably a little bit more from that game. Romero was the only player to pick up DEFCON. Last season, Romero looked fantastic. I do think Romero, Lacroix, these 5 million assets that they don't have the attacking threat of a Porro or a Munoz, but they are obviously a little bit more expensive than a Richards or a Van de Ven. They're going under the radar, but they're so good for defensive contributions. So I do think, again, if you were wildcarding or looking at 5 million assets, Lacroix and Romero, for those reasons, I do really like the idea of. The big thing about this game, Spurs set up in a back 4 rather than a back 5, which we were all quite surprised about. All week we were saying, yeah, they'll do what they did against PSG, set up in a back 5. You'll have Spence and Porro as wing backs. You'll have Danso, Van de Ven and Romero as the centre backs. They'll set up a bit more defensively. Thomas Frank went none of that. I'm going to go 4 at the back. The press was absolutely unbelievable from that midfield 3 and that front 3. It was sort of like attack first. It wasn't a sit back and defend the entire game. And of course, they didn't go all out like they would have against a team like Burnley. But I thought it was a really positive team selection from Thomas Frank. I think that also City did have a bit of positive team selection from Thomas Frank. I think Pep got the team selection wrong. And that's funny me sitting here and saying that because, like I said, they accumulated the XG. I was just surprised to see Marmoush and Cherki chuck straight in. Doku come out. It meant that Reinders had to play a little bit more reserved. It just felt like he was like, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to chuck all of my best attackers into the team and just hope that it works out. I am very aware that that wouldn't be what Pep Guardiola does, but the balance just felt a little bit off with that City team. I wouldn't be surprised if moving forward, we rarely see a Marmoush, a Cherki, a Reinders, Haaland situation like we did there. And bear in mind, by the way, off the bench came Rodri and Phil Foden. They almost combined for a goal straight away. It was actually Rodri's first touch. I think it was a Foden cross and a Rodri header. Once they come back in as well, I'm not entirely sure how I see City setting up moving forward. But yeah, I think Cherki and Marmoush, if you own either of them, I don't think either really stood out to me. Reinders will continue to be good value, but I did say last week, you have to temper your expectations with Tijani Reinders. He's 5.5 for a reason. He will play slightly more reserved in some games. But yeah, once Rodri comes in, maybe without one of Marmoush or Cherki in the 11, I think Reinders will still have some games where he is a little bit more advanced. Obviously, Ryan Aït-Nouri came off with an injury. Very unlucky if you did own him, although it probably wouldn't have got anything from this game anyway. I still think that Ryan Aït-Nouri in this current system right now just isn't probably as good as someone like a Cucurella because he's essentially playing as a left centre-back. Rico Lewis is inverting into the midfield, and they could even play Mateus Nunes on that side. Maybe this is what Pep wants to do for the time being. Play a back 3, invert a midfielder in. But like I said, once Rodri comes back in, I don't know if that's the case. So it might be that as soon as Rodri's back and starting, Ryan Aït-Nouri is bombing up and down the wing and looking absolutely fantastic. But yeah, keep an eye on his injury. It sounds like it isn't overly serious. I guess you could keep him and just assess what happens once Rodri's back. But then once Gvardiol comes back, there's a little bit of rotation risk there too. I think Trafford had an absolute stinker generally. It was a really shaky performance. He could have arguably been sent off, completely at fault for the second goal. He's just, I don't like what I'm seeing from him. If I had Trafford, I'd keep him. But if you were wildcarding right now, you could definitely do better with at least 2 or 3 other 5 million goalkeepers. On Spurs, just really good. 2 clean sheets in 2. The defenders at each of the price points, whether that be Van de Ven, Romero, Porro, they all look fantastic. You could make an argument for Vicario in goal. But actually, I'm looking at some of the attackers and thinking they could offer some good value as well. I think Papa Sarr has been so good. Ignore FPL for a second. From a footballing perspective, I saw someone said he's like a Yaya Toure regen. The way that man can sort of cover ground, he drives well with the ball. He's actually very solid defensively. That midfield 3 of Paulinho, I think Bentancur and Sarr, it looks really, really solid. Sarr in particular, from an FPL perspective, at 5 million, he's played 90 minutes in both games. He had a decent amount of XA in the first game against Burnley. And in the 2 games so far, he's managed 9 and 10 defensive contributions. So I look at that and I just think, do you know what? At 5 million, he gets forward a fair amount. He's playing in a team that could keep clean sheets based off what we've seen so far. Extra point there. Might get defensive contributions. I'm not saying he'll be a world beater, but I think at 5 million, you could definitely do worse. I probably prefer him right now to a Xhaka or a Dewsbury Hall. He might be my favourite 5 million midfielder. Richarlison deserves a shout. I mean, he's been so good under Thomas Frank so far. Thomas Frank feels like he does this. He's such a man manager. You feel like he got the best of Wissa. He got the best of Tony. And right now, he's getting the best out of Richarlison. Richarlison feels like a player that just needs the manager to believe in him. So yeah, I was really impressed with him once again. Another excellent game. Even stepping away from FPL, just the way that he's linking up that team. I think he'll continue to start. The concern is he's been subbed 2 games in a row now around the 70th minute. So even if Solanke isn't starting, I don't see Richarlison getting more than 75 mins at the moment, which slightly puts me off. Kudus is a great own as well at that mid to cheaper price midfield slot. If you do need a player right now, we'll discuss later. I'd be very tempted to include him on both a free hit and a wild card because the minutes are good. He's playing in a good attack and the fixtures are absolutely there. So yeah, I want to give credit to Spurs. I'm not sitting here saying that City should have won, but I do think that 2-0 may be slightly flattering, and I wouldn't stress too much if you own Man City players. So next game, a little bit more boring, probably slightly less to talk about, was Bournemouth 1, Wolves 0. So again, we talk about players that we expected to pick up defensive contributions at the start of the season. If you watched any of my content on my FPL Raptor channel on YouTube, Agbadou, Senesi are absolute DEFCON monsters. We said this. They will pick up defensive contributions a lot more than normal players because of the way that the teams play and the way that they defend. So Agbadou and Senesi, both on 14 defensive contributions. And also Diakite, by the way, who looks a very decent shout alongside Senesi. So if you want a 4.5 defender, Truffert, Senesi, Diakite, these aren't bad options at all. So yeah, Diakite with the 10 defensive contributions. In terms of goals and assists, Tavernier scored the goal, Semenyo got the assist. I do think that Bournemouth looked really comfortable in this game even before the red card. So I don't want to say it's one of those games where you can't really take much from it because there was a red card. But obviously the red card in the 49th minute for Totti did kind of change the vibe of the game. At that point, Wolves had absolutely no chance. But to that point, Bournemouth were super dominant. So I do want to give credit to Bournemouth. And I do think that Bournemouth just are a better team than Wolves. This isn't a scoreline which massively surprises me. I guess the main Bournemouth player that a lot of people are looking at is actually Semenyo. He could have come away with another 2 attacking returns here. He obviously got the assist, but he hit the crossbar from quite literally about 2 or 3 yards out. It was one of those where it was whipped in from the right-hand side, and he had to sort of hit it on the half volley. But because the ball came at such speed, he hit it at such speed, and it absolutely just crashed on the underside of the crossbar. So, again, if he comes away with a goal and an assist on top of his brace in Game Week 1, he's probably going to be like 7.5 million. So it's probably good for owners and those looking to buy that he didn't score the goal, because his ownership will probably stay slightly lower. But I look at the fixtures coming up for Bournemouth. They're sort of middle of the table in terms of how difficult they are. Spurs isn't great this week, but then they've got Brighton, Newcastle, Leeds, Fulham, Crystal Palace. There are no games there where you'd say, I absolutely don't want to play a Bournemouth attacker, but also there aren't like too many banker fixtures. Like Aston Villa, for example, have Sunderland and Burnley. There aren't too many of those fixtures in there. But yeah, I still think Semenyo at that sort of mid-price midfield position is arguably the best player to go out there and buy. Like if you have a Rodgers right now, I can absolutely understand the justification to do Rodgers to Semenyo. I also think Eva Nilsson is still a great buy. I know he's been really frustrating. Like Semenyo's getting loads of attacking returns. He's not getting anything. He did have a one-on-one. Like he was the one that forced the red card for Totti. If Totti didn't bring him down, he had a one-on-one. And we know that he is a good finisher at points. So I feel like he might have finished that. And I still like the fact that I think Bournemouth look like a good functioning attack. I think defensively they will concede goals this season. But going forward, they look the Bournemouth from last year who scored a decent number of goals. So I still think Eva Nilsson is great. If I owned him, I would not be considering selling at all. On Wolves, the only Wolves player really that people are looking at right now, unless you have an Agbadou in your team, is Strand Larsen. He's also been really frustrating, right? Again, people talk about Fulkrug, people talk about Watkins, but Strand Larsen's not doing too much on his end. I still think if he stays at Wolves, for me, he is the best budget forward. You can still call him a budget forward at that price, I think. So if I had him, I'd absolutely be keeping and waiting a little bit longer, unless you can get to a João Pedro, a Chris Wood. If you can upgrade him all the way there and you've got the funds to do so, I can understand it. But if you're moving him around to someone in and around that price, even an Eva Nilsson or a Thiago, it's just not worth it for me. I would just keep him. Just a note that on Monday, Newcastle submitted an official bid for Strand Larsen around the 50 million price, and apparently Wolves just straight up rejected it. They want to keep Strand Larsen. They don't have a replacement in mind for him. So as a result, they've rejected. I kind of do expect Newcastle to go back unless Wolves are literally like, no money will be enough. Because you would imagine if they start getting to 60 mil, 65 million for Strand Larsen, even if Wolves don't have a replacement, that is a lot of money. Now, I know that Strand Larsen's only just joined Wolves permanently, so maybe they are just going to put their foot down, but that is one to monitor. I certainly wouldn't be buying Strand Larsen, but for now, let's see what happens across the week in terms of the transfer rumours, and I'd probably end up keeping unless you can upgrade. The next game, another big surprise, Brentford 1, Aston Villa 0. Brentford were absolutely shocking in Game Week 1. So were Aston Villa. These are two teams that looked really poor in Game Week 1. But by all accounts, given all of the players that they've lost, given that they've lost Thomas Frank, I certainly expected it to be Brentford who were shocking once again in Game Week 2, not Aston Villa. In terms of DEFCON, by the way, there were, I think, 5 players here from Brentford that picked up defensive contributions. Dango Ouattara on his debut with 16. Damsgaard with 15. Yarmouk with 15. Collins with 13. Vandenberg with 12. And Coyote with 11. That kind of tells you everything you need to know about how Brentford approached this game. I know in the interview, Keith Andrews said that he was so happy with how difficult Brentford made it for Villa and that they didn't let Villa play the game they wanted to. It was very high. It was very Thomas Frank, in all honesty, very high energy. The press was fantastic. They were getting stuck in. And for Dango and Damsgaard to both be well and truly on defensive contribution points, that kind of does tell you everything you need to know. Obviously, Dango scores the only goal, took it really well. The second chance, right? He's just so fast, Dango Ouattara. We've seen that so often for Bournemouth. I actually really don't mind him at 6 million. A little bit of a spoiler alert for the free hit later. Dango Ouattara is in there as a punt. He is a little bit expensive. Like, if he was 5.5, I'd really like him. 6 million's like, is he better than a Reinders or an Anderson? I'm not sure. And then if you've got money, is he better than Ismail Assar at 6.5? Again, not fully convinced. But with Sunderland away this week, like if you wanted to take a punt, and especially on a free hit, I certainly don't mind him. The best player on the pitch by some distance, arguably one of the top players of the game week, was Damsgaard. What a footballer Damsgaard is. 10 assists, 2 goals last season in the Premier League. He obviously missed Game Week 1 due to the birth of his child, comes back in and absolutely just dominates the game. So good on the ball. Again, defensively really solid as well. He felt like, I still think Brentford are in trouble this season in terms of they could be relegated. But if they've got Damsgaard fit, it's like he's such a good player. It just adds that little bit more confidence in them in any single game because you know what he can do with the ball at his feet. So yeah, highly impressed by him. In terms of Villa, I don't know that they were as bad in Game Week 2 as they were in Game Week 1, but it's just they're not really creating tons of chances. And you do worry about them, right? The energy looks off. The vibe looks off. Emery looks confused. Even Emery's team selection worries me a little bit as well. They don't have the money to go out there and buy anyone in the market, really. So they're relying on loans. It looks like a depleted squad, in all honesty, when I'm watching them. And they've got Europe. How are they going to cope with all of that? I've got absolutely no idea. They did take 17 shots in this game. Depending where you look, it was either 1 big chance or 0 big chances that they had. And the only one that could have potentially be classed as a big chance was one that fell to Ollie Watkins. Rodgers did have a small chance himself on his left foot, but didn't take it particularly well. Rodgers and Watkins have been awful. And they're a lot of money. Like, if you're sat there right now with Rodgers and Watkins in your team, that's 16 million of your budget taken up from a team that haven't scored yet. They're I think the only team, I could be wrong, the only team in the Premier League that haven't scored a goal. The concern I have with selling Rodgers and Watkins is that the fixtures are absolutely brilliant. Like, if you sort by fixture difficulty across the next 3 to 8 weeks, Aston Villa are comfortably top. They've got Crystal Palace, Everton, Sunderland, Fulham, Burnley, and then Spurs. Like, to have Sunderland and Burnley in the next 5, it would feel very difficult personally for me to sell my Aston Villa attackers unless I had no other issues or it allowed me to go and make a huge upgrade or maybe go and get Erling Haaland in place of Watkins, then I can get it. But as much as I said that I would be tempted by a Rodgers to Semenyo or something like that, I wouldn't ever do that in my team because I still do think that Villa are a good team. The question will be, at what point do we decide that Villa are going to struggle this season or there's been a drop-off? Like, if in Game Week 3, they're also really bad, do you then sell them then? But then, like I say, you're then selling them ahead of Everton, Sunderland, Fulham, Burnley. It just feels like there's never going to be a great point to sell them. So you could bite the bullet now and just go for it and just say, do you know what? I've seen enough from the first two. I don't want them. But I would not be surprised if they put in a good performance against Crystal Palace and then go into that brilliant fixture run of 3 in a row where you'd be really happy having them and score loads of goals. Let me know what you're thinking right now around Rodgers and Watkins. So essentially, my conclusion would be I would keep them unless you can make a massive upgrade or unless you are just absolutely done and you would enjoy your team and the game more if you didn't have them. Just by the way, on Game Week 3, Crystal Palace have looked really, really good. We'll discuss Palace later, but they do have on Thursday an away trip to Norway for the Europa Conference League playoff game. That might be enough to make me want to keep them as well, because as much as Palace are solid, they are playing a lot of games right now where other teams don't have to, or they can at least rotate a bit more. So yeah, that was Brentford 1, Aston Villa 0. The next game, Burnley 2, Sunderland 0. I, again, played Esteve in my team with Dubravka on the bench. In hindsight, I wish I'd have played both of them. It did look very much set up for a Burnley clean sheet. But then in Game Week 1, Sunderland looked really good against West Ham, and Burnley looked a little bit poor against Spurs. So again, it shows not to pay too much attention to one game week, especially Game Week 1. Ekdal, Hannibal, Xhaka, and Reinildo, who I think right at this stage we're just calling Ronaldo, picked up defensive contribution points. And then Anthony and Cullen both got a goal and got an assist. If you look at the XG in this game, it was 1.00 to 0.77. So it was basically a 1-1 draw or a 0-0 draw. So Burnley, again, maybe slightly fortunate. But Cullen and Anthony have both been really, really solid so far in the opening 2 weeks. In particular, Jadon Anthony at 5.5 million is one to watch. The fixtures for Burnley, though, I'll just scroll up and look at them, are so bad. They've got, you could say United's not a bad fixture, but United, Liverpool, Forest, City, Villa. You're just not going to buy a Burnley, you're probably not going to buy a Burnley attacker anyway, let's be honest, but especially ahead of that run of fixtures. But moving forward, if Burnley do have a good fixture run and Anthony's still playing well, I would just keep an eye on him because I've been really impressed. He's got a goal and an assist. And against Spurs, he had 0.44 XG and 0.36 XA. So not only does Anthony have returns, he's also accumulating really good data. So keep an eye on him. Obviously, Esteve came off. If you are worried about him, Esteve's such a legend, by the way. I don't know if you've seen the clip going around, but in the clip, he basically says, like, what is FPL? And someone's like, loads of people have picked you in this game. And he's like, I'll try to do well for you. Goes and gets the clean sheet. Then he comes off early and we're like, no, is Esteve injured? He then takes to Instagram and confirms on his own Instagram. He's like, no, it's just cramp. Don't worry. Like, what a legend in FPL. The thing is, you're not really playing Esteve, I don't think, anytime soon. So it's not much of a concern. But yeah, apparently it was just cramp. And then probably the only other thing to note was Ballard picked up an injury. I think Ballard is going to be an elite FPL option this season. Not only does he go and get that 17-pointer in Game Week 1, which was so impressive, when he got injured, I think it was a groin injury, which is where he leapt in the air and headed it. And I can't remember who was on the end of it. It might have been Mayenda, but it was very close to being a goal. So he could have come away with an assist in the opening 10 minutes before he went off injured. So it's a bit of a shame. Let's see what the update is on Ballard if you own him. But yeah, I guess no one's really looking to buy Burnley or Sunderland assets right now. I think you've missed the boat on Sunderland in terms of the opening fixtures, and Burnley, the fixtures aren't there to attack either. Next game, Arsenal 5, Leeds 0. The reason I say it like that is obviously I went into this without any Arsenal, and I could have done with a slightly better performance from Leeds. I wouldn't stress too much if you own Leeds assets or you were thinking about having Leeds assets. Like, Leeds looked very good in Game Week 1 against Everton, and they were never going to really dominate a game like this. Like, Arsenal are just the superior team. So as much as they only accumulated 0.17 XG and they conceded almost 3 XG, it wouldn't bother me too much. Rodon did pick up defensive contribution points, by the way, which is good. If you went for Biol in defense, the 4 million Leeds defender, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't come in for Strauch in Game Week 3. I was quite surprised that Rodon and Strauch started again with Biol on the bench because he's so good, right? They've signed him for this reason. But I guess it was just like Leeds were so good in Game Week 1. Maybe it was just like, give them the benefit of the doubt, keep the same sort of defensive setup. I guess the big talking point is, actually, let's start with Eze, unveiled at the start of the game. Absolutely fantastic. Eze looks buzzing. He's going to be a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant signing for Arsenal. In terms of FPL, I quite like that Arsenal have difficult fixtures across the next 4. So across the next 4, Arsenal have Liverpool, Forest, City, and Newcastle. I like that because I don't have the temptation to go out there and go and get an Eberechi Eze. But as soon as the fixtures improve around Game Week 7 or Game Week 8, that will absolutely be a time I'll look at it. I guess it just depends, like, is he going to start every game? Is Martinelli or Trossard going to get the occasional game ahead of him? There are enough concerns to me right now, but again, the fixtures aren't there regardless. But very, very exciting signing for Arsenal. And yeah, let me know down below as an Arsenal fan how you feel about that one. the big talking point was Timber. Timber getting the third biggest score of any defender in a single game week ever. I think John Arnorisa got slightly more, and then there was another one after that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But a 24-pointer for Timber with 2 goals, an assist, and bonus points as well. Luckily, he didn't get DEFCON. If it had got DEFCON, it would have been 26 points. It's a real shame that he isn't fully now. Now, Ben White does really struggle with injuries, as does Timber, by the way. But yeah, Ben White's not fully fit at the moment. And after that performance, you would imagine that Timber does start more games than White. And I would have imagined he would anyway. But again, he's just had the Leeds game. He's now got Liverpool, Forest, City, Newcastle. I don't expect as many attacking returns or clean sheets. So I think Timber is fantastic. I'll readdress the idea of bringing Timber in from game week 7 onwards. But for now, I just don't see the point in doing it. And it's the same for Calafiori. Calafiori's got back-to-back 13 pointers, by the way, on 26 points in total. So Calafiori has been super good. I saw someone say on Twitter, or X, we need a new name for the Calafiori position in the team. And someone said it was like left winger, inside forward, midfielder. He's playing a very unique position. He's kind of inverting, but also overlapping. And he just keeps finding himself in and around the box. He's obviously a quality footballer too. So it is a shame that Arsenal have 4 good fullbacks, right? They've got Timber and White at right back, and then Calafiori and Lewis Skelly at left back. But I do think at the moment it looks like Calafiori and Timber are first choice. If you wanted to go there, you could. Obviously, Saka going off injured. I think he'll be back post-international break by the looks of it. The BBC reported that it's 3 to 4 weeks they're looking at him being out for. He does struggle with his hamstrings, and last season, obviously, picking up that long-term injury, it was the other hamstring, by the way, so it's not a re-aggravation of the same hamstring issue. I do just worry. We said for a while he played so many games at such a young age that there was always this concern of his body kind of packing up on him. So I hope that he doesn't keep getting injured again this season, because then there will be a genuine concern and that he can bounce back from this. Given it's a hamstring issue, I assume they won't rush him back, because hamstrings are the number one injury. If you're into sort of physiotherapy and sports science, you know this. It's the number one injury for sort of re-aggravation and re-injuring. So they need to be very, very careful with a hamstring issue. And also, like I said, given that even if he is back for Forest, it's Forest, City, Newcastle, I basically think if you've got Bukayo Saka, I would sell, and you can always look to bring him back in. And not only for that reason, but also Gyökeres took the penalty when he was on the pitch, and he took it incredibly well too. So there would just be enough concerns for me to just say, do you know what? If I had Saka, use the money, downgrade him to a Semenyo, and you've already got yourself a few million. And I think that's probably the best idea. By the way, shout out to Declan Rice. Saka's set-piece delivery has always been great. Declan Rice at points last season was brilliant. Every single corner and free kick that Declan Rice has taken this season has been brilliant. I kind of wrote him off as a 6.5 million asset because he's not going to be great for defensive contributions, and we've seen that. He won't pick them up on a regular basis. But if his set-piece delivery continues at the rate it is, he might become an option with how good Arsenal are in the air. So yeah, maybe I overlooked Declan Rice slightly too much, but his delivery, massive shout, because he's clearly been working on that over the summer. I should obviously mention Gyökeres' brace. He took the first goal really well, right? Timed his run well, running behind the line, cut on his right foot, scored the goal. It felt a little bit, I don't want to disrespect either team here, it felt a little bit like a charity match goal when I watched it. And someone said, and this is incredibly rude, I'm just passing on what they said, but it did make me laugh. It felt a bit like watching like an ex-legend in like a Legends charity game. He did make the run. It wasn't at a particularly high pace. He then cut on his right foot, and Leeds didn't really make an attempt to particularly tackle. And then he sort of scuffed or pulled his shot into the bottom left-hand corner, and it sort of just rolled in. And I don't think Perry dived. So it just felt a little bit like it was weird, because on paper, it's a great goal, but it just didn't feel like a great goal when I was watching it. Maybe I'm just a Gyökeres hater, but let me know down below in the comments what you thought about his performance. I thought largely it was more positive. It was great to see him getting good minutes as well on the pitch right at the end and takes the penalty. And by the way, an incredibly impressive penalty. Like, he took that with some conviction. I have to give a shout out to Max Dowman for winning the pen. When he came on, it felt like a 15-year-old was on the pitch. Like it made me want to like cry for him, because I was just like, I want him to do well. And the first 2 or 3 duels he had, he was sort of chucked off the ball and he looked like a child. And I was like, this just feels like it's a bit too soon. Then he grew into it though, and he was brilliant. Could have scored a goal, won the penalty, obviously, which was a penalty because he got his foot stepped on. So yeah, interesting note, by the way, Max Dowman was not in the game when he got the assist. FPL swiftly added him to the game a couple of hours after the game. He's 4.5 million. But it was interesting to see that he wasn't even in the game when he got the assist. But yeah, fantastic performance from Arsenal. Nice to see Dalman doing well. Gyökeres brace. I wouldn't be bringing in any Arsenal assets, just given the fixtures over the next 4. So guys, let's have a chat about Club, who are the sponsor of FPL Therapy once again this season. As I've been saying for a while now, it's basically free to play fantasy football cross with like club ownership. You can see my squad right now on your screen. It's looking brilliant. I am about 7 million over my salary cap, which means that basically as things stand, Fernandes and Raya refuse to play for me. If I get under the salary cap, everyone can play, or I can choose to stay over the salary cap and just have those 2 players that aren't available. But given that Fernandes has Burnley, I kind of want him. I'm also allowed to be a bit more biased in this. I've got Dorgu, Ahmad, and Burmo and Bruno. It's a nice way for me to own Manchester United players without absolutely sabotaging my FPL team. And yeah, as I've also been saying for a while, I'm in the game. So there I am, the director of football. When you actually download Club for the first time, by the way, I'm the first person that you'll see on your screen, and I'll sort of guide you through those opening sequences. But yeah, the way that you build up your club is basically meeting with Manny. So each time I do these videos, and several times a day, I'm just going to collect my cash and coins there. I basically meet with Manny, and he will pull you any player from the Premier League, and you can choose to either sign or reject them to improve your team. So I try to guess each time who I'm going to get. This can be any player in the Premier League. So I'll allow you to do your own guess right now. If you're watching by yourself, just guess in your head what player you think will come up. And let me know in the comments if anyone, I'm not going to be able to fact check this, but let me know if anyone did manage to guess it correctly. I am going to say, I always guess Crystal Palace players, and it's never Crystal Palace players. I'm going to say it will be Calvin Bassey. Just a random prediction. So I tap to reveal. It'll come up with a rarity first. So base, core, rare. So I don't think it'll be Bassey then. Rare midfielder. Aston Villa. Could be Tielemans. It was Tielemans. Annoyingly, I've just released Tielemans, which always happens. Tielemans is actually a really decent player for Club, by the way, when he's playing well. Look at all these scores that he gets, like in the sort of greens, the 20s and above. The fixtures are there to target. I'll decide later. I won't reject him immediately. The reason that I released Tielemans is because I just managed to get Morgan Rogers, actually. And if I'm going to have one of them, I'd rather Rogers, just has a slightly higher ceiling, as you can see by the scores. The scoring system, by the way, is a lot more advanced, which is nice. People always ask me what the scoring system is. If you just click on one of the players, you can see the sort of things that you pick up points for. But it's nice to see, actually. I'd always rather get more points in a game if I possibly can. So yeah, do make sure to check out Club. There will be a link down below, as always, to join. Please do use my link if you're going to join, rather than just typing it in on the App Store, because it supports me, as always. And also, I'm almost at 2,000 people in my league. I would love to hit 2,000 people before the Game Week 3 deadline. So I'll just bring up my code on the screen right now. It is 3462SK7. It will also be in the description down below. Once you've signed up using my link, make sure to copy that code in, join my league. And if you're thinking, by the way, I can't play a fantasy football game and join your league, it's like Game Week 3. It's head-to-head every week. And the league is actually ordered by the specific game week. So you can see the person that finished top for Game Week 2 was Drop It Like It's Slot, which is a pretty funny name for Club. But yeah, it's each game week. So it doesn't matter if you've not played in the previous ones. And even your individual head-to-heads is against someone each week. So yeah, check it out in the link down below. Thank you for the support, Club. I really do appreciate it. Let's get back to the episode. So guys, next game, Palace 1, Forest 1. Lacroix was the only player to pick up defensive contributions. Chris Richards was just off. Sarr, Hudson-Odoi got the goals, and then Munoz and Ndoi with the Ndoi, the Forest attacker, with the assist as well. This was exactly the kind of game I expected. 2 very good teams facing off against each other, and not much to separate them. Like, if I was to say in terms of quality levels, I think Palace and Forest are very equal teams. I kind of needed this to be a 0-0 with Williams and Richards in my own team, and really, neither team accumulated over 1.1 XG, so it wasn't a game with tons of chances. I would say in the first half, Palace were more dominant. In the second half, Forest grew into the game. Other than that, not much to say from a game perspective. Munoz, once again, incredibly attacking. Like, I genuinely think Munoz is like top 5 in terms of my favorite players in FPL. I'm so gutted I didn't start the season with him. Not even necessarily because he's got an assist and a clean sheet, but more so just because I know how good he is. I love him. He did so well for me last season. And I went into preseason content with Munoz in my first draft and just saying how fantastic he was. Like, when I look back at my first draft, I had João Pedro, I had Munoz. Like, my team just looked better. And I'm like, what happened over preseason that made me change my mind? So that's, again, a reflection for later in the season. But I think Munoz, top 3 premium defenders to own right now. If I was to list the 3 best premium defenders to own in terms of minutes, fixtures, attacking threat, everything together, Cucurella, Munoz, Pedro Porro. So if you need a premium defender for whatever reason, I would be looking at those 3. I think all 3 of the Palace defenders are great value, though. So don't overlook Lacroix and Richards if you can't get to Munoz. Lacroix is just going to be, I'll put out a prediction right now. I think Lacroix will be top 2 for defensive contributions across the 38 game weeks this season in terms of defenders. And he's so good for bonus points if they keep a clean sheet. Chris Richards will still get there, though. Again, he was on 8 this week. He was just off of it. And at 4.5, he offers great value too. So if you need a defender, I actually like all 3 of them. Because remember, after game week 3 against Villa, Palace's fixtures really improved. So Fantasy Football Hub has them 8th on the fixture ticker from 3 to 8. They've got Sunderland at home and West Ham away in 4 at 5. They look like a very good chance for a clean sheet. Then Everton in game week 7. So they've definitely got some clean sheet fixtures coming up. And yeah, I wouldn't overlook those defenders. Sarr and Mateta, I still think will offer really good value, even with Eberechi Eze leaving. Sarr in particular strikes me just because he's at a really nice price point. He's quite cheap. And I'm looking at, if I do end up selling someone like a Wirtz or selling a Palmer this week, I am super tempted to pivot to Ismaila Sarr and just have him in place for those really nice fixtures in 4 and in 5. On Forest, again, Anderson hit 11 defensive contributions for the second week in a row. Very, very unlucky if you have him, because if he just gets one more tackle in both of those games, he's got 4 extra points. And at that point, he's basically, he might even be outscoring, but a very similar level of points to Reinders, who everyone thinks is fantastic. So if you own Anderson, count yourself very unlucky. But now you go into West Ham at home. And if I had my Forest, if I had several Forest assets, 2 or 3 of, I'd be very happy going into game week 3. West Ham just look like one of the worst teams in the league, as we've already spoken about. It's a home fixture. We know how good they are at the City ground. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like a 3-0 kind of game. Chris Wood, Anderson, Gibbs White, any of the defenders. Also, Douglas Luiz at 5 million, by the way, has been priced. I don't know if we spoke about that in the previous episode. But yeah, 5 million. He will get DEFCON. When he gets into the starting 11, he'll probably take set pieces, or at least some of them, off of Anderson. But he had 0 minutes in game week 2. So considering he didn't come off the bench and he's not had any minutes, I would just say that for now, Douglas Luiz is probably a bit of a no-go, but he might rival the likes of Papa Sarr at that 5 million price point as my favourite option. I think that's it really in terms of the game. Both good teams, both worth investing in, but they just kind of equaled each other out here. The next game, this is the biggest scam I've ever seen, was Everton 2, Brighton 0. When you look at the XG in this game, and again, XG isn't everything, I have no idea how Everton didn't concede at least 2 goals in this game. And actually, if you watch the game as well, I was just watching chance after chance after chance for Brighton. Actually, Garner, like I said, got the most defensive contributions in game week 2 with 17. Keane got 13. Weaver got 13 as well. And by the way, he's 3rd, I think, overall in terms of total DEFCON. Tarkowski. I was sat there. I like tracking DEFCON live during games because I'm an absolute nerd. After 70 minutes, Tarkowski was on 4 defensive contributions. He then made 7 clearances in the final 20 minutes to get 11 defensive contributions. So out of nowhere, Tarkowski goes into getting to the 2 FPL points. And again, I think essentially scammed a clean sheet. So 2.43 XG is what Brighton had. Even if you take the penalty out of that, we're still looking at like 1.6 XG. Pickford had an absolute storm, and not only the penalty, but made a fantastic save there as well when Tarkowski basically passed the ball to, I can't even remember, I think it was a Yari. So Pickford, brilliant game. Brighton's finishing, absolutely terrible. The penalty was not particularly good from Welbeck. I think just very, very, very fortunate if you have an Everton defender. Like 2.43 XG probably puts them as like the 2nd or 3rd most chances in the game week for Brighton. So if I had Brighton attackers, I wouldn't stress too much. Although most of you that had a Brighton attacker might have owned Ruta, and Ruta obviously wasn't in the squad. We should find out midweek how bad the injury is. For now, I probably wouldn't move him on, although I don't necessarily think he's a great pick anyway moving forward. Obviously, Iliman Ndiaye gets his first goal of the season. The first goal is at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. What a name for a stadium. And I still think that he's a fine asset. Like, he should be on penalties. His minutes are good. We saw he actually linked up really nicely with Jack Grealish. And I guess Jack Grealish is the big talking point with these 2 assists. The first assist, where he cut onto his left foot and whipped it across, absolutely brilliant. The assist for the Garner goal wasn't really assist, right? It was just a few, like a 3-yard pass sideways, but they all count. At his price, he could offer value. I just think he's a little bit expensive for me. I don't see him scoring tons of goals, and you need a little bit more than just assists. And I also don't see Everton scoring loads and loads of goals moving forward. So a lot of people saying, what do you think about Jack Grealish? I think he's a fine pick. If you want to go out there and do it, I'd expect him to start most games, but I would much rather for a cheaper price someone like Ismaila Sarr. I say a cheaper price. Let me just double check. I think Grealish is coming in at about 7 mil. This is why it's easy. So he's 6.5. So he's the same price as Ismaila Sarr. Apologies. But I still think I would rather Ismaila Sarr at that price. Maybe a little bit more tempting at 6.5 though. I think that's it in terms of the game. Barry started ahead of Beto, so if you have Beto or Barry, if you have Beto or Barry, they're probably both non-options as things stand, because in any given game, you kind of feel like either could start. So yeah, 2-0 to Everton. If you own an Everton defender, count yourself very lucky. I wouldn't probably be desperate to sell any players from these teams, though, just for the sake of it, unless they've got an injury or an issue. Right, Fulham 1, Manchester United 1. I could talk about this game for an entire podcast myself, so I'll have to stop myself from doing so. Started the game brilliantly, Manchester United. I was really, really impressed. Opening 20, probably should have had a couple of goals. Genuinely, I think we were that good. Created chances. Cunha hit the post. Cunha had a one-on-one, which was a brilliant save by Leno. Obviously, chucked the penalty in there as well. I think Man United arguably should have won this game up until about the 60th minute, though. And then that back up, the second half, Fulham just become completely dominant. They had so many chances. It actually ended, despite the penalty, with Fulham accumulating 1.76 XG and Manchester United 1.63. So maybe a draw is about fair, but I would say all in all, just really disappointing considering how well we played against Arsenal and how well the first 20 went. It all kind of fell apart after the penalty miss as well. So yeah, let's start with DEFCON. Fernandes got 13, Lukic 12, Anderson got 11. So again, a player that we said should be good for those defensive contributions. And then De Ligt, who has been, I think, really good over the first two games with 10 too. Obviously, Smith Rowe came on and scored the goal for Fulham. And the goal for Manchester United was an own goal. So Manchester United technically haven't scored a goal this season. They've scored an own goal. So no player with any goals for Man United. I'll start with Bruno Fernandes in general, and also the penalty miss. On the penalty miss, it was a shocking penalty, like really, really terrible. He obviously bumped into the ref and then blamed it on the ref. Do I think that that probably did massively impact him? Yes, but you can't blame it on the ref. You need to score that penalty, right? You can't be an elite player getting that sort of money, be the captain of your team, and let something like that put you off. So I do feel for him because he's in the middle of walking back and getting ready to take a penalty. That probably did affect the way that he took, but he still needs to dispatch it. I am still pretty confident with Bruno Fernandes that he takes the next penalty, just because, again, of the role that he plays in the team, but also his fantastic penalty record. So Bruno has scored 61 penalties and missed 7 in his career. That is an exceptionally good record. And in recent years, he's very rarely missed. You normally feel very confident with Bruno taking a penalty. I've seen some people say, well, what about Matheus Cunha? Matheus Cunha has actually only taken 2 penalties in the last 4 seasons. I think he's got 7 scored and 2 missed, if I'm correct, in his record. So he's not taken many, especially in recent years. Even in those, doesn't have like an exceptional record. Brian Mbeumo, on the other hand, for Brentford, has scored 11 and missed 1. And that one was actually more recent, if you remember. I think it might have even been last year. So all of that to say, I think Bruno Fernandes will still take penalties for Manchester United. But if someone is going to take them instead, I would lean towards it being Brian Mbeumo as opposed to Matheus Cunha. I'd love to know what you think of that down below in the comments, but that's the way I'm leaning. Obviously, he misses the penalty, so he gets -2. Hits 13 defensive contributions, so he gains 2. So he finishes on 2 points, which basically is like another blank. Do I think that Bruno is an elite option in FPL right now? No. Would I be happy if you told me that you were going to go without? Absolutely. Do I think you should sell him this week? Under no circumstances do I think he's a very good sell. He's got Burnley at home. He's got Sunderland at home in 7. And like, who are you moving to or that confident this week will outscore him? After that, feel free. And if you're sitting here saying, I do not understand people that on a free hit would want him or on a wildcard or would captain him, that's absolutely fine. But I do think we need to work out how much outcome is affecting our thinking. Because ifs, buts, and maybes, I said this last week, but if Bruno scores that pen, which more often than not he does, that's a 13-pointer he's coming away with. Almost definitely there. Maybe a 12-pointer. If Bruno comes away with a 13-pointer, we're not having this chat. He's probably, this is why you pick Bruno. He's got penalties, he's got DEFCON. Just because he misses it now, he's a troll. Everyone hates Bruno. So yeah, I'm not trying to advocate you going out there and picking him and captaining him. I can understand if you don't want to. I might captain him myself, but I don't recommend you follow. But I certainly wouldn't be selling him this week. I can't wrap my head around that. He's already had some transfers out. Lots of people asking about Mbeumo and Cunha, as well as me saying that I think Mbeumo is probably ahead in the pecking order. Mbeumo's also taking all in-swinging set pieces from the right-hand side. So he could have had 2 or 3 assists from corners in that game. His delivery is really, really good. And he's also closer to goal on average, I think, than Cunha. Like, Cunha keeps dropping into these pockets and dropping deep to pick up the ball. But Cunha has looked the most likely to score goals so far. He hit the post. He had a one-on-one. Just due to how brilliant Cunha is and how much he sort of dictates the play and dominates the game, I think for me, Cunha would still just about be my preference. But I would not be surprised if from an FPL perspective, due to the role that he's playing, Mbeumo picks up more goals in the team. So I think it's very close, but I would leave Mateus Cunha just. And I guess from Fulham's perspective, the only key thing to note was probably 4.5 million King starts again. I think he had a good game, but once again, Smith Rowe comes on, looks good, and gets a goal. So I just think King's minutes are still a little bit suspect for me. And Anthony Robinson came off the bench as well, so he should be back in the starting 11. I know a lot of people do like Anthony Robinson. So yeah, disappointing game, disappointing result. But Craven Cottage isn't an easy place to go to, so not the end of the world in terms of getting a point. Man United, I think you can go out there and go get a Fernandes and Mbeumo Cunha. Dorgu, if you want to as well, looks very attacking. But I can also understand if you just want to avoid altogether. Right, final game of the game week. We have Newcastle 2, Liverpool 3. So I watched this on Monday night. This was an interesting game to say the least. Newcastle were absolutely dominant for the first 30 minutes, right? Absolutely exceptional. I couldn't believe it. Liverpool barely stringed 3 or 4 passes together. Like, truly just the better team. And then when you consider how good Newcastle were in game week 1, by the way, I was like, hang on a second here. Like, and I still think that Newcastle could be a really serious team even without Alexander Isak. Like, they've really got a point to prove. Gravenberch then just scores out of nowhere. And that goal that came out of nowhere, by the way, people keep saying Gakpo's brilliant. Gakpo's fine. Both goals were just a 2-yard pass to the side of him, the assists. So yes, he got 2 assists, and yes, he's been much better than Florian Wirtz. But again, temper expectations moving forward. He's not always going to get assists like that. But anyway, Gravenberch scores the goal. The 15 minutes after that, it did just knock the wind out of Newcastle a little bit. They just kind of lost their edge and their energy. Second half then starts. Liverpool score within 20 seconds. Again, it's a 2-yard pass from Gakpo to the side. Ekitike took that goal beautifully. And what a player they've got on their hands there, by the way. Out of Gyökeres, Ekitike and Sesko, it looks probably like Liverpool do have the best deal there with Ekitike. They don't even look like they need Isak at this rate. After that, though, Newcastle just grew back into the game and absolutely dominated. I should note, after the red card, after the second goal, between the 46th minute and the 100th minute, it was XG Philosophy on X posted this, between the 46th minute and the 100th minute, Liverpool accumulated 0 XG. Against a 10-man Newcastle, 0 XG. They didn't have a single shot. That is absolutely astounding. Like, how good were Newcastle in that second half with 10 men? I wouldn't say robbed Newcastle, but they deserved so much from this. I think they did deserve the win, but at the very least, a draw. If you look at the XG, again, even with the penalty, it was 0.93 XG for Newcastle, 0.7 XG for Liverpool. So Newcastle had higher XG with 10 men. It was just really poor from Liverpool and really good from Newcastle. So what does this mean? Do I think that Liverpool are a really poor team and we don't want to invest? No. They still scored 3 goals. They've got 7 goals in 2 games. And this was always going to be a tricky game. Like, the way that Newcastle went into this game, with everything going on with Isak and just with having, again, that point to prove, it was always going to be hostile. There was always the chance, by the way, that a player picked up a red card like we saw with Gordon, which for me was absolutely a red card, by the way. There was just so much animosity and like energy in that game. So I don't think this is representative of what we'll see from Liverpool, but I do think that Newcastle was super impressive. They've also got Leeds in game week 3 Newcastle. My concern with Newcastle, Gordon red card, who I think probably would have been my favourite asset. You then had Tonali and Joelinton go off injured. Fabian Schär went off with what looked like a concussion, and they did call it a concussion sub. There is a world where Newcastle have like 4 of their best players out injured ahead of game week 3. Let's assess the update that we get midweek on Newcastle. But if they do have various players out, it does make it a little bit trickier to pick them. By the way, Nick Pope picked up an assist in this game, and Livramento got an assist and looked really good again. So I do think there are players to pick, absolutely. Like even Osula, if he's starting as the number 9 and Isak doesn't get reintegrated, could be good in the absence of Gordon. I just think that I might have seen enough there in terms of it was a game that took a lot out of them, picking up the injuries. I would have an eye on Newcastle. Let me just scroll up to their fixtures here because they are very, very good coming up. They've got Leeds, Wolves, Bournemouth, Arsenal, Forest, Brighton. Outside the Arsenal game, really, really solid. And again, they play Arsenal actually in game week 6, a week where a lot of people will look to free hit. If you free hit in 6, it's Leeds, Wolves, Bournemouth, Forest, Brighton. That's a really nice fixture on. So yeah, I've got my eye on Livramento. I did have my eye on Gordon. Maybe I'll have my eye on a Barnes or an Elanga now, but super impressive performance from Newcastle. I should just give a little bit of a shout out, obviously, to Rio. I'm going to go with Rio because I don't want to try and... Do you know what? Engamoa? I'll try and pronounce his surname. Let me know if I pronounced that correctly, Liverpool fans. But amazing feeling for him to go and get the winner. And he took that goal, by the way, so well. The little dummy from Soboslai, the shot from Rio was really, really good. And I guess I have to mention Salah scamming an assist at the end. Salah's not been good. He's not been good in do you know what? Salah's not been good for most of 2025, but people keep saying, oh, Salah owners got so lucky. There is an element of that, but you pick Salah because he's always on the pitch, he's on penalties, and he does find ways to score at the end of the game. You can't, like Salah's been doing this now for so many seasons. Last season he did it. He's done it in the first year. You can't call it lucky if it's done over a really consistent period of time. It's like saying that Chris Wood is a lucky finisher because he always scores. At some point you just have to say, Salah just, because of the role that he plays in the team, is a great pick and will always get returns towards the end of games. But yeah, the assist was slightly fortunate there. And I actually do need to discuss Florian Wirtz, don't I? Because Florian Wirtz is in my team. I'm hesitant to say that I want to sell him because he's got Burnley in game week 4 and then Everton in game week 5. And it feels like you want him for those 2 games. And selling him before that would be crazy because you didn't pick him in game weeks 1 to 3 expecting tons. Like Newcastle and Arsenal were never going to be great games. Even Bournemouth in game week 1, you looked at that and you thought, yeah, do you know what? It's a good fixture, but it's not like a standout exceptional fixture. So to sell him off the back of that feels tough. But he's had 2 early-ish subs when Gakpo, Ekitike have had better minutes. I just worry with Wirtz. Like, he doesn't look like he's having an ability to have an effect on the game. He's not looked particularly good in either game, and he's a lot of money. Like, Gakpo would have been such a better pick. A little bit of hindsight there, a little bit of outcome bias, but do I think I'll sell Wirtz this week? I think there's a chance. It will depend on the fitness of Palmer, because if Palmer's injured and he's out for a little bit, I'd much rather sell Palmer. But if Palmer's going to be back soon, or there's even a chance he features in 3, Florian Wirtz downgrade to someone like Sarr, like I say, does so much for my team. So I'm not ruling out the option of selling Wirtz, but I also wouldn't be surprised if in games like Burnley and Everton, he gets on the ball a lot more and looks a lot better. And due to the position he's playing, he's always going to have a chance for an attacking return. So yeah, I've been so unimpressed with Wirtz and Salah. Gakpo and Ekitike look a lot better, but it has only been 2 weeks. And it could easily flip. I wouldn't be surprised if in game 3, 4, 5, Wirtz and Salah outscores Gakpo and Ekitike, because we just don't have a big enough sample right now to make that decision. So there we go. Those are all the games from game week 2. So what I want to now do very briefly is I'm just going to show you a free hit team, a wildcard team, and then discuss my own plans as well. So on your screen right now, you'll see a free hit team that I built. I did put this out on YouTube as well, so you might have seen that on my FPL Raptor channel. Essentially, I think I would want to target the promoted teams, but I would also want to target players that have been playing well and look in form. So the team that I've gone for here is Sells in goal, a back 3 of Cucurella, Dorgu, and Collins, a midfield 4 of Kudus, Cunha, Fernandez, and Dango, and a front 3 of Haaland, Wood, and João Pedro. On the bench, I've got Kelleher, Barnes, Porro, and then a 4 million defender. In terms of players that very nearly made their way in, I actually had Livramento and Gordon in my free hit team before the red card for Gordon, and then also the substitutions for Tonali, Joelinton, and Cher just worried me enough to take Livramento out. But I think Livramento, Pope, Elanga, Barnes, you can absolutely justify putting any of them in. You could also justify going for a Pedro Porro instead of someone like Dorgu if you wanted to, because Spurs have been great. Porro's been fantastic. In midfield, you could have a Forest midfielder. Gibbs White and Ndoye, I think, could both be decent shouts. And then in the forward line, I think Thiago, Richarlison. Like, there are different picks you could go for. But when I look at this free hit here, I feel like it covers most of the major bases. I like the punt on Dango Ouattara. I would have triple United. I wouldn't have double defense, though, which means I've got Dorgu, Cunha, Fernandez. And that front 3 of Haaland, Wood, João Pedro just looks absolutely brilliant. So yeah, nice and simple. I don't need to overly talk about a free hit, but that's what I would be going for roughly. And then if we move on to the wild card, it looks similar in a few positions, but I've actually decided to go for a Haaland and Salah wildcard here, which you might not want to do. You might see one of them as expendable, which is absolutely fine. I've gone, again, Sells in goal, a back 3 of Van de Ven, Dorgu, and Richards, a midfield 4 of Kudus, Semenyo, Anderson, and Salah, and then the same front 3 exactly of Haaland, Wood, and João Pedro. On the bench, I've got Dubravka for cheap, Reinders, Trufer, but you could go for a Senesi or a Diakite, and then Rodon. I think this team has an okay balance. The major concern that I would have with this team is because I've wanted to fit Salah and Haaland in, as well as Wood and João Pedro, and 8 attackers rather than 7, like I've not got a Guiu or a Josh King in here, it means that I only have 4.5 defenders. So I don't have a Lacroix, Pedro Porro, Munoz, Cucurella, Van Dijk, Gabriel, Saliba. If the premium defenders look good, like Cucurella continues to smash it, maybe Gvardiol comes back and looks brilliant, Van Dijk starts to get clean sheets, maybe a goal as well, Porro and Munoz are absolutely tearing it up, I will look at this defense and think it's very, very weak. And I look back to what I said at the start of this podcast about what are my learning lessons from what went wrong in Game Week 1. It was inflexibility. So I do look at this right now because I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice the likes of Kudus, Semenyo, Anderson, Reinders, Wood, João Pedro. Like, these are all players I would want. So I look at this and think, do you maybe just go without one of Salah or Haaland? Do you just have one of them in your team? Because if you did, who would I go without? I mean, if you did Salah down to Gakpo, that is a lot of money. What is that? That is, quick math, 7 million you're giving yourself. With 7 million, you could upgrade one of your midfielders, but then you could just have an absolutely elite defense. You could have Cucurella, you could have Munoz, you could have Pedro Porro. If your back three instead look like Cucurella, Munoz, Pedro Porro, but then add Gakpo instead of Salah, that looks brilliant. Alternatively, Haaland down to an Ekitike, or Haaland down to, you could still go for an Ollie Watkins, by the way. I wouldn't rule out the Aston Villa assets altogether. That would then again give you about 6.5 million. I think the balance would be so much better if you went with one rather than both. So again, consider that. If you were, like I say, to downgrade Salah or downgrade Haaland, I'm not sure that I would invest loads more into the midfield and attack. I think I would keep the midfield and attack very similar. I would just go for a more expensive defense instead. I don't think a wildcard is out of the question. My only concern with the wildcard, it is before an international break, but like I said, I think people over-exaggerate what can go wrong in an international break. And then on top of that, the transfer window is still open. It might be, let's say that Isak doesn't sign, let's say Liverpool don't sign another forward. Ekitike goes from what is already a great asset to an exceptional asset. Gakpo also looks good if they don't sign another winger. I think there is enough up in the air right now that if you can get away with delaying the wildcard, I probably would. But if I were to play it this week, I would go along the lines of this. I know people will say there's no Man United player for Burnley other than Dorgu. I think you can get away with that because after the Burnley game, I know they've got Sunderland in 7, but I don't think you're that desperate to own a Manchester United player. So yeah, that's your free hit. That's your wildcard. And then just to finish up then with my own team. I don't, as things stand, plan on playing a wildcard or a free hit right now, because as much as I don't think my team looks fantastic, I also think I'm only 2 to 3 transfers away from being really happy with my team. I think 10 of my players are absolutely fine. A couple of them sit on the bench anyway. I just need to change a few of the players, and I think I'm happy enough to just delay playing a chip. So, in goal, I've got Sanchez, obviously Dubravka on the bench. My 5 defenders are Porro, Williams, Juve, Richards, and Estev. At the moment, I'm playing Porro against Bournemouth, Williams against West Ham, and Juve against Forest. My midfield 5 at the moment is Palmer, Salah, Wirtz, Fernandes, Reinders. Again, they've been so disappointing, but overall, still a solid midfield 5. And then Watkins and Fulkrug as my front 2, with Guiu on the bench. So what this comes down to is 2 things. Palmer's injury, need to wait for that. Once I get the update on Palmer's injury, that will make things a lot easier. And then also Fulkrug. I really do need to upgrade Fulkrug. Even if it's upgrading to Thiago, by the way, I can't move sideways now because Fulkrug's fallen in price. That would have been an option ahead of Sunderland for Thiago. But basically, I think I'd like to get Fulkrug to João Pedro. I think João Pedro looked really good in Game Week 2. Again, should be on pens in the absence of Palmer. If Palmer is out, João Pedro is the one I want. Otherwise, I look at Chris Wood as a decent option, or I'm even tempted to move slightly early for Jean-Philippe Mateta. But Fulkrug needs to go. I'm not happy with him. So, I've then got Palmer, Wirtz, Fernandes, or Watkins as ways to free up money to do that. As much as Fernandes has been disappointing, I can't bring myself to sell Fernandes ahead of Burnley at home. So, for me, that's a non-option. So, then I come down to Watkins, Palmer, or Wirtz that I can sell to free up the money. All of those are viable. Given the fixtures for Aston Villa, and given that he is so good for minutes anyway, I think Watkins is my least favourite player to sell there. So, to narrow down the options, I am probably looking at Palmer or Wirtz down and Fulkrug up. If I go Palmer down, I can afford to go down to anyone I want, really. I could go and get a Cunha and Burmo. I could go and get a Semenyo. I was looking at Gordon, who is now a non-option. It's probably Palmer to Semenyo is the transfer that makes the most sense. And then I can get Fulkrug up to a João Pedro. The other option I have is if I do Palmer to Semenyo, I can actually do Guiu up to João Pedro. So I can go all the way up from Guiu, in which case Fulkrug becomes my 8th attacker. I do wonder if that makes more sense to keep Fulkrug just as an 8th option if I need him, rather than having Guiu. But then I'm obviously tying up money in a Fulkrug position that I don't want to keep necessarily. My other option is downgrading Wirtz and upgrading Fulkrug. So like I said, Wirtz down to an Ismail Assar or a Kudus, and then Fulkrug up. My final option is a -4 hit. So something I could do is like Palmer, Wirtz, and Fulkrug out and just change those 3 players. Or I could do Palmer, Fulkrug, and Guiu out and bring in like a Semenyo, João Pedro, and sorry, it would be an Anderson, João Pedro, and Chris Wood. I know that's probably super confusing, especially if you're not watching on YouTube and you're listening. All of that to say, I basically need to downgrade a player in my team to be able to upgrade Fulkrug. And I'm also looking at a combination of 3 transfers where I take it here. All of that will depend on the fitness of Palmer, how I feel about Wirtz and Watkins throughout the week, and anything else that I get as well. There is also a world, I suppose, in which I keep Fulkrug, but I don't feel fully confident in that. So guys, there we go. That is my plan for Game Week 3. And that is the end of the podcast. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you don't mind these solo podcasts too much. It allows me to get everything off my chest. And hopefully you've found it slightly therapeutic as well, given the name of the podcast. If you've got to this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider doing so. Again, I'm trying to hit 20,000 subscribers. I can only do that with your help. And if you're listening on audio, please do rate 5-star. We're almost at 800 5-star ratings, which is unreal. If you could rate 5-star, it goes a massively long way. You can do that on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, which won't be during the international break, we're going to have the week off. But after that, ahead of Game Week 4, we're going to have a guest for that one. Do not worry. So yeah, I'll see you for the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.